maybe you could first some of the folks here know you really well and check out every single piece you read that you write, but also some people may be new to your writing. So tell me a little bit about kind of yourself and the concept for not boring, and then also like maybe what excites you most about this space.
Sure. So I guess not boring. It started out as the beginning of the pandemic hit. I had just quit my job. I had this little newsletter not called Not Boring on the side. I was going to start something in-person based, and COVID hit and that didn't work. And so I just decided to start writing kind of these deep dives that are a little bit fun and also serious on tech companies. In the first year, I don't think I really read about Web3 at all. And then about a year in, this thing clicked. And this is what's exciting about the space. And you just brought it up now. Like the first thing that I wrote in the first article that I wrote about Web3 was this idea of what happens when you remove the middleman, or when less value goes to the middleman. There's still obviously value for a router in the middle of everything, but the take rate comes down dramatically. And what I thought happened then, and what Braintrust is kind of proof of, is that more value accrues to kind of both sides, to the companies that are hiring in this case, and obviously to the talent that's doing the work. And so that's what got me into the space in the first place. And it's been really cool over the past kind of year to dive into use cases. And Braintrust is obviously kind of first and foremost there.
Cool. Yeah, let's talk about the use cases, because always like when a new space is developing, it's always hard to kind of like determine what's real, what's not real, and like what's sizzle and what's steak. And you talked a lot about that in your article. And I'm sure like all of us in this world of Web3 take a lot of critique of like, hey, where's the real world applications? Like, how does this touch real lives versus just people that are like whatever doing DeFi trades or things like that. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what you think makes Braintrust different, or maybe what you're excited about in terms of real world applications.
Sure. So this is a debate. Hopefully you've all been spared from seeing this, but one that I think probably Gabe and I have been in the middle of and seen a lot of on Twitter, about whether or not there are real world use cases, whether this is all just kind of a scam, whether it's people trading tokens back and forth to each other, and what the actual value to real people is. The way that I bucket that is in a few different categories. One, there are going to be whole new things that don't look anything like an old model, and that's great. And we don't know what those are going to look like. There's the category over here, which is real scams. And like we all want those out of the market. And in the middle, there's a category of existing businesses that can be made better with smart tokenomics and with the smart use of community ownership. And I think Braintrust falls into that category where, I think, as you pointed out, that take rate on a consulting firm, the amount that they take versus what they pay to the people who are actually doing the work is ridiculous. And so by giving community ownership, it kind of protects against that ever happening. In the beginning, a lot of marketplaces start out by saying, like, we'll keep our take rate really low. We need to attract a lot of talent. We need to attract a lot of companies. And then it's, as soon as you have all of those people locked in and you rely on that marketplace for work, they can jack the take rate up. Right now, if Gabe decided to turn evil and say, we're going to a 50% take rate and it's all going into my pocket, there's no way that could possibly happen. Everybody here would have to vote on it, and it's the money that you're getting paid. And so that's the beauty of this to me, is that it starts out maybe in the same way that a regular marketplace might, and it needs a good product and it needs to match people with good jobs, but then it guarantees that some central organization is not going to be able to jack up take rates on you.
Yeah. Listen, this has been a really fascinating thing to watch. I've been involved in Web2 marketplaces for essentially my whole career. And one of the interesting things is that it takes quite a long time basically for those marketplaces to go up what's called the S curve, which is basically like they're basically venture subsidized, right? So like when you first started using Uber, like the rides were super cheap,
Yep.
right? Everyone loved it because basically you have a bunch of venture capital that subsidizes the cost. And then as they start to get to scale and go up the S curve, they need to start extracting value from all their users, and that comes in the form of take rate. So sometimes it can take almost a decade to really start to see the impact and like the impact of all these Web2 marketplaces that were started, 10 years ago. You're just starting to see all those externalities, right? Like the Uber drivers hate Uber, the Dashers hate DoorDash. It's endemic in every Web2 marketplace. And that's probably some of what's driving a lot of interest in this space right now, right?
I mean, I think what's super fascinating is why that happens and kind of how that happens. And why venture capitalists are willing to throw away billions of dollars in the case of Uber early on, and why the company is willing to lose so much money. And the goal is, and the goal was with Uber, and it just didn't quite work out because of the whole delete Uber thing. But the goal was winner take all, you own the whole market. And at that point, there's no choice. And so once that's the case, you can raise prices, you can raise the percentages that you take. All of the market is golden, and you become a profit machine if you can reach that point. And so that's why people are willing to lose so much money. And that's why it's wonderful to have a community on thing where that's not even possible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, so let's touch on this point of community and like community governance, because I think that's a really critical feature of these Web3 marketplaces. It's not just about pushing more value back, right? Like eliminating the middleman and cutting out the fees, but it's also about enabling the community to upgrade the protocol, right? And there was a huge protocol upgrade in the Braintrust community over the last month, which I'm not sure people have fully grokked yet. I think your piece did a great job of breaking it down, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about like the protocol upgrade that happened from the Braintrust community and your view of like the fee converter and maybe why that's significant to the network.
Yeah, to me, so I guess the fee converter, what happens is that now instead of a client kind of paying USD or USDC and that going directly to the nodes, it goes to buy back it, through a smart contract, goes to buy back Braintrust tokens and use those to use that money to fund community grants and different things that are good for the protocol. To me, the impact of that is a lot like what happened with ETH and EIP 1559, or eventually what will happen with ETH2, is this idea that now there's this closed system where all the transactions that happen on Braintrust mean that there's more demand for the token itself, which is good for the value of the token. Before, there was kind of an expectation that those two would work in line, but it wasn't exactly tied in. And now there's real connection between demand for talent on the network and demand for jobs and the actual kind of demand for the token.
That's so cool. So you had talked a little bit about this concept. You said like, hey, the user-owned networks have the potential to both like create and capture more value than their investor-owned counterparts. Can you break that down a little bit and maybe talk about what you concluded after doing your deep dive?
For sure. So what I meant by that was on the create side. So you showed that $5.3 trillion number before, and you talked about what happens when you take that take rate from 70, 80% or 20% down to 10%. And it just creates more activity on the network, more people who were going to stay in a full-time job that maybe they didn't like because it was secure and they knew that they had access to a job and they didn't have to pay 70% to somebody to get that job. Maybe they would just stay in that job before. With a lower take rate and an easy opportunity to find great jobs, it makes it much more likely that people are going to start working more flexibly like they want to and doing the jobs that they want to and all of that. So that expands the market. And then two, you have this kind of Braintrust token now that everybody who's involved in the Braintrust community benefits from more activity in the Braintrust community in a very different way than is the case with a Web2 platform. One of the pushbacks you get is like, oh, well, you could own Amazon shares or you could own Airbnb shares. And sure, but the interesting thing is that with something like Braintrust, you're giving those to people for doing things that are valuable both for the network and for themselves. It's not like somebody has to go buy Braintrust tokens to make that happen. So I think that's a really kind of great way to make the ecosystem kind of work together.
Yeah. Well, again, I think you do such a great job of breaking down these, what can be like both new and pretty complicated concepts and making them like easily digestible, making them relatable. And that's always something that like new projects struggle with. And so you've done a fantastic job of that. And we're certainly really appreciative of all the time that you spent doing a deep dive on Braintrust.
Well, I mean, Braintrust really is, I think, the shining example. And I was so excited to be able to write about it because it is such a great example of the power of a tokenized community and community ownership. So I was honored to be able to write it.